The two Michaels finally returned home after being held captive in China for more than 1,000 days. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from LA. Lisa, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig were released shortly after Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou cut a deal with the U.S. government in relation to fraud charges. Now, she was allowed to return home to China. Now, the White House says the release of the two Michaels, nothing whatsoever to do with Meng Wanzhou being allowed to return to her home country. I mean, come on. Are we supposed to believe that?
Yeah, I'll have to say again, if you believe that, I have that bridge to sell you. This goes along with a lot of other things coming out of the White House right now that are very, very skeptical. And really, let's start with the priorities here in terms of the Michaels being released. I know that they were arrested in December of 2018, so that it's been a horrific time for them and their families, almost 3 years in captivity on bogus charges. So I was very happy to see that they got a very warm and well-deserved welcome in Canada, along across the board with leaders and their families and all Canadians really celebrating their release. And as you said, are we supposed to believe that this was not a deal that was cut? Obviously, it was. These two landed hours apart from each other. She landed back in China, and the two Michaels back in Canada. And Obviously, there were three-way talks between the U.S., Canada, and China to have this release. But we're giving up our leverage with China. As much as we're very happy to see these two released because never should have been apprehended to begin with. What's going to happen with China? We're having a harder and harder time, showing any sort of clout or having any sort of leverage over them, and it's getting increasingly more difficult. And this is one episode that the Chinese can really declare a victory on this one because they got everything they wanted. And let's remember again that the two Michaels were arrested 2 weeks after the Huawei executive was taken in. And she was taken in Canada at the request of the United States because she was wanted for fraud charges, banking fraud charges. And what will happen with this case? What will happen with Huawei and other companies that are taking advantage of the Western economy? What will happen with the Chinese? What will happen with the Chinese in Hong Kong and in Taiwan and everywhere across the globe where they are taking advantage of our kindness, our naivete? I don't know what to call it, but we're happy that the Michaels are home.
Absolutely, you bet. Now, Lisa, the Taliban is resorting back to some of their old ways. They displayed bodies of 4 people they say were killed by police, people who were involved in a kidnapping ring, and the bodies were put in various parts of Herat for public display. Now, the Taliban says this will send a pretty strong message to criminals in Afghanistan. But you talk to a lot of people, that's pretty barbaric, but the terrorist group feels that this is quite an effective deterrent.
Yeah, well, barbaric is the way that they're going. Even though they've promised the West that they are new and improved, they're moderate, they're reformed, they're not the Taliban of the 90s. They're absolutely that and maybe worse because now they have legitimacy behind them. They have a flag, they have a palace, they have a capital, they have a sovereign nation under their control. So we're looking at such barbaric moves for them to really set the precedent, to set the tone of what they expect from the people who live under their country and under their flag. And of course, by displaying these bodies on cranes, it's almost like the old biblical, they chop their hand off if they steal, so that it's, a visual for others not to do the same crime. But across the board, whether it's the morality police on how women are dressing, they are telling the barbers not to trim men's beards too short so that it doesn't look too modern. Schools, they're not teaching in a co-ed fashion. They've told women to stay home from universities, told women to stay home from high-profile jobs. It's not going to be the same Afghanistan, but it looks like it's going to be the same Taliban and maybe worse.
Now, speaking of women, the Afghanistan girls soccer team has been granted asylum in Portugal, Lisa. The girls aged 14 to 16 and their families were fearing what their lives might become under the Taliban, so they left their homes and everything else behind.
Yeah, this is one of the happy stories. These are young women who are very accomplished athletes. There's, it's a large variety of women. Well, some of them want to be doctors and teachers and astronauts and judges and all that. And it's a very colorful story when you read the details of each each young woman and what her hopes and dreams are. But we also have to take a moment to realize that there are many young women who are left behind that don't have this opportunity like the soccer team has. Now they're going to start over in Portugal and maybe move on to other places in the West, but they are able to, be free and to live in a way that they like and perhaps continue playing soccer and perhaps continue going on to medical school and wherever else their aspirations take them. But though there are women that are left behind in Afghanistan who will not have that opportunity, won't be able to play soccer or whatever sport they play, won't be able to dance and sing and do whatever that they want to do. So it's a happy, happy story, but of course, it reminds us of those who do not have this fortune.
Yeah, the U.S. State Department is under pressure to find creative solutions, Lisa, right now to help vulnerable Afghans who were left behind in the evacuation. They're in hiding. It'll be even more challenging now that the United States no longer has an embassy in Afghanistan.
Exactly, and how the numbers that they're citing right now is that about 125,000 were evacuated by the United States and allies starting in August through the end of evacuation, and they are estimating that about 100,000 others are left behind. And what this kind of constitutes those who either help the United States as researchers and volunteers and translators and those who worked in think tanks and those who, were drivers and such. So they are marked, meaning they are in danger because they help the United States. And leaving them behind is as if we left Americans behind because they did help us. It doesn't send a good message to those who want to help us, around the world, wherever the United States has a presence. What's the message there? We will abandon you when we're done with you. And now, as you said, we don't have an embassy, so we don't have any sort of leverage to say to the Taliban, listen, we need to get these people out. And they're not keen to let their own out. They don't want a brain drain. They don't want their best and brightest to leave. They don't want their translators and researchers to leave. They don't want their doctors to leave, researchers to leave. So, for that reason, they're not going to be keen on letting these individuals leave. Not only that, they will have this mark on them. So they will be even in more danger if they do try to leave. That's why they have to look for creative solutions. And that probably means escaping by ground transportation, trying to get to a neighboring country. And from there, and remember that the neighboring countries have had enough. They're not about to open their arms up to the Afghan people because they know that it will lead to hundreds of thousands of refugees flooding over the border. So they don't want that issue. And for that reason, even the ones who have a legitimate reason and wanting to get out and having to get out to not risk their lives will have a challenge in doing so.
Will some of those countries, neighboring countries like Pakistan, even accept a lot of these Afghan refugees? Or just say, you know what, go back home?
Yeah, they've put a stop to it. Uzbekistan was a place where Tajikistan, where a lot of the Afghan people were quickly trying to find refuge. But again, they're sending them back. They're closing the borders. They're not making it as easy as it once was because again, they don't want to deal with the refugee problem. They've learned and they've watched across the globe where the Syrian migrants and the Afghan migrants from the previous war and the Iraqi migrants from the previous war were on the march, and they're all over Europe and different countries where they had a very lax migration policy, and they saw how it affected those places. So a lot of these countries don't want to be inundated with refugees. They don't want to deal with the issue, and they'd rather say no from the get-go.
Now, the Taliban has asked foreign airlines, Lisa, to resume commercial flights into Kabul, saying problems at the airport have been resolved and the facility is now fully operational. But let me ask you something. Will foreign airlines, which are not Taliban friendly, even want to fly into Kabul, fly in and out of
Right, and that's
Afghanistan?
Right, and that's the important question here. The Taliban want to do everything in their power to make it seem like, oh, it's another day in our beautiful country of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That's what they're calling themselves. So they want to do everything possible to make it look like we're a smoothly run country, but beneath the surface, they are scrambling to make this the Islamic Emirate that they want it to be. So of course, they're not going to have, flights coming in and out of places that are not sanctioned by the Taliban. And of course, who gets on, who gets off. The Kabul airport, of course, is basically a war scene over the last 2 months with everything that went on over there. But based on reports, we're hearing that they have fixed the airport. They have remodeled it in some areas where it needed to be fixed. And now they're claiming that they're ready to be back in business.
Now, it appears as though not a lot of countries are recognizing the Taliban as a government in Afghanistan, not even Russia. What will that mean for the country moving forward? How will they be able to do business internationally?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because you see, have like the Russians, for example, coming to the United Nations General Assembly and saying, "Wait a minute, we're not on board here," which is surprising because the Russians are always on board, particularly when it comes to Afghanistan. You know that they have a history there, but I think this just means that the Russians are playing podium diplomacy, and they're just trying to say what needs to be said at the United Nations, but the Taliban have their own friends. That's the sad part. You know, no Western sanctions or marginalization or isolation will work this time around. We gave up any sort of leverage we had with Afghanistan, and now it will be the Qataris, the Chinese, and of course, I think the Russians will still come around. Of course, the Iranian regime is on board. With the Iranian regime, perhaps comes the Venezuelans and some other rogue elements, but they have enough of a list of close friends that have come to their rescue. Pakistan, of course, being a neighboring nation and wanting to be on good terms with the Taliban, has already come forward as well. So we call these, the friends of the Taliban. They're there, they're present, they've already made their voices heard, and they've said that they want a seat at that table when it comes to the Taliban and, outlining the future of what Afghanistan will be.
Lisa, the International Atomic Energy Agency says that Iran has failed to fully comply with terms of the recently reached nuclear monitoring agreement. Under the agreement, Iran must allow the agency to access monitoring equipment and replace its memory cards, which hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah, it's interesting if you read some of these left-leaning Western publications about this particular story. It's exactly what you said. That the deal was that the UAE demands, I'm sorry, the IAEA demands that this is the UN's watchdog group for Iran's nuclear weapons, demands that they go in there and they have access, they have transparency, that they're able to replace these memory cards and have access to these memory cards. And the report goes that they were able to do so except for one location. And the way that the report sounds is like, okay, well, you got the majority of them. You don't need that one last location. No, we need to know all of these locations because that last location is where they may be, producing a bomb. And that's probably the case. Why give the IAEA access up to the 1 yard line and not give them that last location if you're not hiding anything? If you're going to be transparent, be transparent. So the report does kind of say they're doing their best. That's the tone of it. But the reality is that the Iranian regime is not complying. We're not surprised. They're calling the shots as usual, and they believe that the West wants a nuclear deal. So they will, release as many reports as possible up to the point where the West is fearful. The United States, particularly the Biden White House, says we need a deal today, and let's not delay. And that's exactly what's going to happen in the coming weeks. We're going to see the White House turn around again and say we need to get back to the negotiating table because the Iranians are closer than ever to a nuclear bomb. And it's not logical by any means to say that because they are marching forward with a bomb, we should get into a deal with them. They should show us that they're not going towards a bomb, that's not where their intentions and motivations are. But here we have it. The truth is that they're not giving us access. They're not giving the inspectors access, and we're fearful that they will have a bomb very, very soon.
Lisa, we only have a few short moments left here, but I wanted to talk to you about North Korea. They say they have hope for peace and a summit with South Korea if Seoul shows some respect. What kind of respect are we talking about here?
North Korea is always asking for respect. I think they have a very big. If you look at their history, it's actually true that they've always had these parades and these it's just all about respect and honor and that's what happened between Donald Trump, for example, and Kim Jong Un was maybe perhaps a show of that. That if you respect us, we can respect you. It didn't go anywhere further than that, but it was kind of like an exchange of respect. And letters that ensued after that, well, we don't know if they were full of respect or not. But now Kim Jong Un's sister is on the scene, and she says, "We're ready to sit down with South Korea, but we need to have respect." And we invite them to take the first move, make the first move. And so now we're waiting for this courtship between North and South to begin. Both sides have expressed interest, and again, so if there's respect, we can go forward and see what happens between North and South Korea.
Reminded of Rodney Dangerfield, no respect, no respect. Shows how old I am here. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.